That night, I actually was reviewing a couple of reports, and then I looked at my personal phone, and it was just swamped with texts saying, "I've been fired, how about you?"
I was with my daughter when I found out, and I said something along the lines of, "They fired us by email." I worry about what's coming with this many IGs losing their positions.
Like Mike indicated, my phone was blowing up with lots of fellow IGs saying, "I'm fired," or "You fired." Come to find out, I was not fired at that time.
Since taking office, President Trump has fired about 18 inspectors general in what's being called a Friday night purge.
The late-night purge of government watchdogs.
President Trump firing 18 inspectors general.
It happened in a Friday night purge.
Inspectors general are the watchdogs responsible for investigating and reporting on fraud, waste, and abuse in their respective departments. The Wall Street Journal sat down with 3 of those recently fired IGs to discuss their roles, the lawsuit that several of them have filed in response, and the long-term implications of their mass firing.
To do it in a 2-sentence email with only an allusion to changing priorities, that was surprising.
I know you guys are supposed to be apart from politics, but politics is kind of swirling all around Washington. So you know when you put out a report, it could draw scrutiny, but that's literally what the inspectors general were created to do, right? To put reports out. Is that true?
The IG Act calls for us to take a look at issues of fraud, waste, and abuse, to prevent and detect that, and to promote economy and efficiency.
We're in a moment now where a lot of Americans are wondering whether there's too much government. How should Americans think of the inspectors general when we already have a Justice Department, we have the FBI, we have state law enforcement? How do inspectors general fit in there?
We have direct connection to our own departments, and that is critical to understand what the programs are, the complexities of them. But Americans should be afraid of the amount of fraud, waste, and abuse in government, and that is precisely why Congress sought to install inspectors general.
Virtually every day we get a request from a member of Congress to do some kind of investigation. But you just got to be, always aware that you can't let political pressure take over, because then the whole concept of an independent IG would go away.
Our whole goal is to try to improve the proper functioning of government. It's not to tear down the agency. It's not to get a one-day headline about some splashy Office of Inspector General report. It's to provide the accountability and the transparency so folks know how their money is being spent.
Why shouldn't the president be able to fire an inspector general if they want to?
The law says the president can fire an inspector general, but Congress passed several laws that said if the president does want to fire, we want to be informed on the circumstances for it. So that's why they said, give us 30 days notice and give us detailed case-specific reasons.
Talk to me about this lawsuit you have filed with other inspectors general, and what are you hoping to achieve?
It's relatively simple. The president violated the law, clear statute, by firing us, by not giving the 30 days notice, or the case-specific reason. What we're hoping to achieve, what the relief we're seeking, is for reinstatement because it was an illegal firing.
Paul, why are you not part of the lawsuit?
Because I was fired 2 days ago. I'm trying to get my bearings, and I've been in discussion with Mike and Christie about joining the suit.
The budget's going to be about $7 trillion this year. I think a lot of Americans, though, feel like there's probably waste, throughout the system. Do you feel like the legacy of inspectors generals is strong in that it's brought enough cases? Or can you guys only just scratch the surface?
I think the IGs have done a great job at identifying fraud, prosecuting where they identify it. But sure, there's much more that can be done. We're limited by the resources that we have.
Reporting information, even when it's unpopular, in fact, almost always when it's unpopular, to department heads, we're fighting for taxpayers.
Paul Martin was not initially removed from his post, but the Department of Government Efficiency, known as DOGE, headed by Elon Musk, quickly moved to dismantle his department, USAID, by removing thousands of employees and cutting funding to hundreds of awards and contracts.
USAID, run by radical lunatics, and we're getting them out.
Paul, you saw what was happening to the agency, obviously. There were people with USAID around the world who had kind of lost access to the computer network, so they really didn't know what they were supposed to be doing. How did you continue to do your job when there was turmoil and chaos going on throughout the agency?
We first cordoned ourselves off, but the people that we rely on at the agency for information Most of them were on administrative leave. They were literally locked out of USAID headquarters, and workers were outside the building prying the letters off the building that said United States Agency for International Development.
Did you see an opportunity to work with DOGE? Were you introduced to them at all?
We were certainly prepared to interact with anybody. We did have meetings with the transition team, and they were very substantive, and I think very helpful and very fruitful, but we had no interaction whatsoever with the Department of Government Efficiency.
Several days go by, you continue doing your job. You do put out a report in early February. Can you walk me through what that report said?
We put out a report talking about the concerns that we had and the risks that were evident because of the drawdown in the number of USAID staff that were overseeing the humanitarian assistance around the world, but particularly in the Gaza West Bank area. So we put that alert out on Monday, and on Tuesday, about 5:30 p.m. that evening, received an email from the White House Office of Personnel indicating that I too was terminated.
Did you think when you put out that report that it could cause waves and that might be the kind of thing that would get the White House's attention and lead for you to be fired?
Yes.
And you did it anyway?
Yes.
And why did you?
Because that's the kind of oversight that we do.
Are you hopeful that the confusion and the noise about this is going to lead to a better understanding of the need for inspectors general, or are you worried that the ability to fire so many people so quickly is going to become normalized essentially, and then we're going to see more and more things like this happen in the weeks and months to come?
The latter, sadly. I think the concept of independent, aggressive oversight via in-house inspector generals is at a tipping point. And I think that this should be an alarm to all Americans, but in particular Congress. And Congress is the one, if they don't want to see IG's authority and value dissipate, they need to wake up.
We work side by side with them to help them do their job. And if Congress isn't going to stand up and say we truly need independent inspectors general, they're helpful to Congress, they're helpful to federal agencies, then I am very concerned about the future.
In response to a request for comment, the White House sent us this quote from Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. Quote, "President Trump is only interested in the best and most qualified people who are also willing to implement his America First agenda on behalf of the American people." Let's say 2 or 3 years go by and we have a system here where the inspectors generals are, terminated at a moment's notice for whatever reason. What do you fear would happen to all the agencies if this is kind of what we end up with going forward?
If things move toward a scenario where you're installing, somebody who is partisan and devoted to one person, there is enormous potential damage in the credibility of that work.
If I could just jump in and say that the Federal Inspector General system really is the envy of the democratic world. It's the budget, it's the access, it's the independence that gives you that true oversight capability.
So is it fair to say then that the independence might no longer exist in the Inspector General system?
I think that's what time will tell whether it does. Certainly, the indications are, given the mass firings here, is that the administration does not want truly independent inspectors general.